Hello, welcome to another video. In this we discuss when the most famous and important people in history passed away. They left behind their art, ideas, and surprisingly often, parts of their bodies. Visiting such remains can be a strange yet intriguing form of remembrance. If that sounds interesting, you're in luck. Today we're diving into historical body parts that you can still visit today. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the Historic America AI channel. Also, leave a comment to let us know what other unusual attractions you'd like to hear about. Now let's get started. Albert Einstein, the genius behind the theory of relativity, is often remembered for his wild hairstyle. After he passed away in 1955, researchers dissected his brain, and some slices were donated to the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where they remain on display. Unfortunately, his iconic hair was not preserved. In 1916, Russian nobles murdered the mystic healer Grigory Rasputin. According to legend, Rasputin's body was castrated, and his appendage, said to be about 13 inches long, eventually ended up in the Museum of Eroticism in St. Petersburg, Russia. Some skeptics, however, believe the organ actually came from a cow. During his presidency, Grover Cleveland secretly underwent surgery in 1893 to remove a tumor from his mouth. To keep it quiet, the procedure took place on a yacht, while the public was told he was on a fishing trip. Today, that tumor is displayed in a glass tube at the College of Physicians in Philadelphia. Philosopher Jeremy Bentham, known for his utilitarian ideas, had an unusual posthumous request. He wanted his skeleton dressed and his head preserved and displayed. After his death in 1832, his embalmers accidentally disfigured his head, which was replaced with a wax one. This wax head is now on display at University College London. The renowned scientist Galileo Galilei, forced to recant many of his life's works, had a rather odd posthumous fate. 95 years after his death in 1642, someone dug him up and removed several body parts, including his middle finger. It is now on display at the Museum of the History of Science in Florence, Italy. Charles Babbage, considered the father of the computer, passed away in 1871 and donated his brain to science. Half of it resides at the Royal College of Surgeons in London, and the other half is in the Science Museum in London. Vladimir Lenin, the famous leader of the Russian Bolshevik Party, died in 1924. Despite his family's wishes, his body was preserved using experimental embalming methods. Today, his body is on display at the Lenin Mausoleum in Moscow. Similarly, Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh, who passed in 1969, also had his body preserved with the help of Russian specialists. He remains on display in a mausoleum in Hanoi, Vietnam. North Korea continued the trend, preserving both Kim Il-sung, who passed in 1994, and his son Kim Jong-il, who died in 2011. Both are on display at the Kumsusan Memorial Palace in Pyongyang. In a curious twist, former U.S. President James A. Garfield's spine is displayed at the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Silver Spring, Maryland. Garfield was shot in 1881 and later succumbed to infection. Similarly, fragments of Abraham Lincoln's skull are kept at the same museum, along with pieces of the bullet that killed him. The famous composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart had his skull stolen by a gravedigger after his death in 1791. Though its authenticity is disputed, the alleged skull is part of the collection at the International Mozarteum Foundation in Salzburg, Austria. Ludwig van Beethoven, another great composer, died in 1827. His physicians secretly saved several fragments of his skull, which are now housed at the Era F. Brilliant Center for Beethoven Studies in San Jose, California. Mao Zedong, former leader of China, wished to be cremated. However, his body was preserved after his death in 1976 and is now on display in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. Lastly, a test tube allegedly containing one of inventor Thomas Edison's last breaths is on display at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. The two were close friends, and Ford was fascinated by Edison's work. There are many more intriguing remains, like the preserved body of George Armstrong Custer's horse, Comanche, on display at the University of Kansas Natural History Museum, or the tooth of the Buddha, enshrined at the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic in Sri Lanka. So what do you think? Would you visit any of these famous body parts? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to check out more videos on our channel. See you in the next video.